Welcome, Bea, to the podcast. It's really great to have you here. And if I'm not mistaken, you're dialing in from the Philippines, where you're from. And you've spent a lot of your life in the Philippines, but also spent a lot of your time in Australia. And you've had some really interesting experiences. So, how about you? Could you introduce yourself to everybody and just like explain what you're up to right now and a bit about your background?
Yeah, so my name's Bea, Bea Trinidad, and I grew up in the Philippines, very typical all-girls school, Catholic, conservative family. Went to University of the Philippines for a year and a half because it was my family's blood to enter into that
Serious
college. So
decision.
the day before, yeah, the day before UCAT, my grandmother went into my room and was like, "If you don't get in, it's shame to the family."
Yeah.
Um, so, but I was living in the same area. So walking to school was like 10 steps away.
Yeah.
Very easy. But I wanted something more. I wanted to question a lot of things, like whether it's conspiracy theories or global warming or religion. So I decided to get out and went to Melbourne for about, supposed to be only 2 years. I ended up staying for 10 years,
Yeah.
a decade, and just really loved the culture there and the people. Had my own restaurant and also worked in advertising, and then just came back about 2 years ago to work for the family business, which is in culinary education.
That's amazing. And what was the thought process like step by step of why you decided why Australia, right, versus any other country? And was there resistance? Like did you doubt that idea? Or maybe your family said that's not a good idea, or they encouraged you. Like what was the thought process behind that?
Like any firstborn, you just want to get out and you're just
Yeah.
a little bit rebellious. Always firstborn have a streak of like angst or something. And so I wanted to get out, told my mom, and she was like, you can only go to a place where you have an auntie
Yeah.
or relative. And that place was Melbourne.
Yeah.
I applied everywhere else but Melbourne, like Sydney, Singapore, just because I didn't want family around. I just wanted to make a few mistakes without the exposure of family seeing you. So, but anyways, we compromised and she said you can go to Melbourne. So I did. And I was the firstborn, so she would only allow me in a little tight leash.
Wow. Yeah.
And there, so I found out like a week before the start of school and University of Melbourne that I got in, packed my bags, didn't even like, it took me a day. I remember the day before I was taking an accounting exam because I
Yeah.
wasn't sure I would get in. So I was like, either I stay in UP, start just focus on accounting or go to University of Melbourne.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a bit of a mixture. Luckily, I got in. So
Yeah.
I decided to just fly there and not even think about it.
And then you worked in Melbourne for a while. You said opened up your own bar, and then what made you decide
Yeah.
to go back to the
So,
Philippines too? And what was that story?
yeah. So, after, I don't know if the same for you, but in college, like I spent more time outside of school than
Oh, of
in,
course.
like,
Of course. Same here. Yeah.
yeah. So I would work so many hospitality jobs. I would try to intern everywhere, like radio. Um, and then towards the graduation, like the year I was supposed to leave school, I had no plan. I had no proper idea of what I'm doing, but I took on like 3 internships. And I said, just get into something. I went into a hardcore newsroom. I went into radio, and then the third one was, I can't even remember. There was another one,
Yeah.
maybe a waitressing job. And I said, just whichever sticks, that's my plan. And then at the same time, I had a restaurant with an ex-partner. So there it was like when I graduated, I took an advertising job and then had the restaurant at night. So it just kind of made sense. Advertising during the day and then tequila at night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good combo. Yeah.
Can't complain, but for sure there were nights I was maybe doing an Hunter S. Thompson kind of lifestyle
Yeah.
where it wasn't so good. I went back, I think it was 2 and 3 years. Honestly, I stopped counting, but
Yeah.
it was just like family. It was just time. And I
Yeah.
couldn't just keep saying another year, another year.
Yeah.
It was inevitable to try and work with a family business.
Yeah.
And so I just decided to come home and
Got it.
see what that was all about.
And how does it feel now that, like, you've lived in Australia, you've grown up in Manila, and now you're back in Manila? Like, do you think, like, what's exciting about Asia that Melbourne didn't have, and maybe the other way around? Are there certain things that you miss from Australia that you don't have in Manila?
Okay. Well, with Melbourne, it's definitely the quality of life and the lifestyle. Just seeing the traffic in the Philippines and
Yeah,
the way people live, it's really a lot of work and finish late nights. And Melbourne, you finish 5. Friday is like beer o'clock
yeah,
lunchtime.
yeah.
So
Very
that
Australian. Yeah,
balance of life is really great. There's football, there's cafes, there's parks. It's a well balanced life and very self sufficient in a way that you do your laundry, you can get it done. Also, it's up to you. Philippines families here, so I think that's very cliche, and a lot of people will tell you that. But being around family and the milestones is pretty good, and opportunity. Like there's 100 million. Is it 100 million still?
I
Like
think
100
so.
million people. That's a lot of people. So if you can get a product right or a business opportunity, then it has potential. Melbourne is just way smaller, that
Well, I mean,
market.
and the Philippines, like you were saying, is a huge market, very fast growing, very young population too. And if you think about the growth in Asia and the Philippines playing like a major role in that, like, do you are there certain things about the country that now maybe excite you that you didn't see 5, 10 years ago? Because I mean, I was in Manila actually earlier this
Mm.
year, and I used to live there back in 2000, 2001, and it seems like the country and Manila specifically has progressed quite a lot, and there's like a lot of opportunity and a lot of growth. But love to know, like, from your perspective, would you say it's something similar?
There is potential. It's
Yeah,
just a question of emotions
yeah,
sometimes. We're very emotional people, very close to Latinos or
yeah.
Spanish blood. So that can get away with progress. Opportunity wise, I guess the efficient, like probably digitalization or teaching skills is one, but it's a question of if emotions would get the better of us. I
Interesting.
don't know if you watch many like news channels in the Philippines. It gets really highly personal.
Really? Okay,
Um,
I didn't. Can you explain that a bit more?
well, I try to watch a lot of the government briefings, and let's say if the data gets on
Yeah,
TV or a Senate hearing, it's very personal.
yeah,
So rather than having a proper system, a
yeah,
lot of that becomes a challenge.
yeah,
But I think there's potential in terms of numbers,
yeah,
like how China is about numbers
yeah.
and people, and same here. That's what I think. Yeah.
Are there companies or like organizations, startups that you admire in the Philippines that are maybe at the forefront of this stuff?
That's a big. I'm trying to think. You know what? I do believe there's a lot of potential in um, mobile banking
Yeah.
or digital banking. So anyone who's playing there, whether it's PayMaya, GCash,
Okay.
all that, that's
These are all local
pretty
companies.
interesting.
Or
Yeah.
okay,
Well, I believe PayMaya is.
okay.
I'm trying to think if there's one local company that I prefer. Hmm. Would you have one? I'm really stumped on this one. Let me
I
think about it.
it's funny because when I think about Philippines businesses, I think about old school companies that have been around for like, like 100 years, like Ayala Corporation, right? I don't think
Okay.
about like new ones, but I mean, I guess Kumu might not be a bad example, right? That's an interesting startup in the
Yeah.
Philippines right now, but
Mhm.
I don't know many, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a really, really good one. I would, yeah, for sure. Kumu's interesting. It's a
Yeah,
way of communicating, but it's very specific to Filipinos
yeah,
in a way that it's coming from that word kamusta.
yeah,
And it's really marketed for people that are OFWs or
yeah,
families that want to connect with each other, friends. So it's unique.
yeah,
Um, Someone did tell me yesterday that the Philippines is a bubble,
yeah,
that there's a lot of things that are specific to our culture
yeah,
that perhaps outside people don't really care so much about. Jollibee's pretty interesting.
yeah,
Potato corner, those brands that are trying to get out of the country
Yeah.
is pretty interesting. National Bookstore,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very nostalgic for
Yeah.
me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
one that I really love is Fully Booked. It's very niche, but I just think they get it right in terms of the kind of people they hire
Yeah.
to service. They're all book lovers,
Yeah.
so I'm traditional in that sense that I
Yeah.
like the customer service aspect. So yeah, those are probably a couple of the top
Okay.
brands that I love.
Well, do you think there's something for people that are outside of the Philippines? Do you think what do people misunderstand about the Philippines? Like common misunderstandings?
I would say that things take time and sensitivity, and the shame aspect is so important. You can't shame Filipinos, and you need to understand that things take time.
Yeah.
What you think is going to take 2 days will take a year
Yeah.
or 6 months,
Yeah.
and you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do,
patience.
I think that's interesting because it's like something that you see across a lot of emerging markets too. Both actually, the time it takes to do something, and also the shame, like saving face thing. I think that's like very
Yeah.
Asian. Have you ever had an example where like I don't know, maybe you're in a business situation or social situation where uh, you had to very like dramatically realize how important that was?
We deal a lot of foreign chefs, so
Yeah.
French, European, American. They're a little bit more abrupt
Yeah.
with how they speak, and with Filipinos, it's quite soft, and there's a way of they'll say something that they don't really mean, but there's
Yeah.
another meaning to it. So just the misunderstandings in a boardroom
Yeah.
are very common. But I think because I have that Australian background, I can understand both. So you have to be a bit diplomatic. But specific situations, trying to think, mainly dealing with chefs, because
Yeah.
chefs are already known to be um, strong,
Yeah.
would be the polite word.
I mean, I think I told you last time, like I've read Kitchen Confidential. That's probably the extent of my experience with chefs, but
Yeah.
it sounds like a pretty intense occupation.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot of heat. Like
Yeah.
people in Silicon Valley, they have a certain different demeanor
Yeah.
with how they deal with collaborating with chefs. Also,
Yeah.
they work by the minute, by the second. There's
Yeah.
heat, so they are under pressure for a
Yeah.
plate of food.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about the work you're doing right now in the culinary world? And actually, how has that been
Yeah.
impacted by the coronavirus? Because I'm sure, like many things, things have had to change a bit.
So I started out with operations with some of our restaurants, then marketing. With family businesses, you have to be dynamic
Yeah.
and change your role. But one that I particularly love now is that I work on the PR and communication side and a bit of business development for the culinary school. So there it's just really establishing the identity or the stories of the graduates and the people. And then there's a bit of corporate communication. So that's a challenge because if a brand's been around for 20 plus years, I think 28, um, you have to hone it for what is now. So,
Yeah.
you talk about TikTok the
Mhm.
last time we were chatting,
Yeah.
it's completely different, right? The way people talk now,
Yeah.
people interact. So, yeah, it's, I guess my main role is to simplify what we're trying to do in terms of stories, press releases, any kind of communication in a way that, let's say you want to learn how to
Yeah.
cook, we'll connect with you.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of corporate jargon. I hate
Yeah.
corporate jargon. So I always think, why would they come to us? Do they
Yeah.
need a recipe? Do they want to know how to poach an egg? Maybe they feel depressed and they want to bake.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the little things.
Okay. What do you notice that's different about the working environment in the Philippines versus Australia?
Hmm. Australian environment is very uh, clear in terms of boundaries. So your boss can be your friend outside.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can go drinking, you can go to a pub, you can watch footy. But when it comes to work, there is that proper structure. where they're evaluating you with performance. There's KPIs, there's, progress checks, and a lot of meetings as well. And there's just a good professionalism. Here is a bit tricky, I would say. There's a lot, again, I mentioned you, highly emotional people at times. And
They're
I was
the Latinos of Asia.
Yeah, exactly. I really do believe that we're more Mexicans than, Asians. And that's part of it. You have to watch what you say to people and how it can get to someone really quickly. And being consistent with your message is the hardest thing. Because you have a goal, but it's how you get people there, right? And most of the time in the environment in the Philippines, if they, what do you call it, job protect, they want to keep their job, so they'll say things behind your back. And then they'll say to other people to make the work less for them, or less attention on the work than more attention on the dynamics of work, friendships, or relationships. That's a challenge for me. Because I'm pretty genuine in terms of the result I want. I always think of like the business goal and how that will relate to everyone. So when you hear politics and a lot of gossip, it does crush your soul or a bit.
It's like
but then you just brush it off. Brush it off, basically.
It's like an internal PR challenge, PR comms. This is why I think communication is like, that's something you have to learn, like by inherently living in, let's say, the East and the West, you have to learn how to communicate with different types of people, where whether you're going from one to the other, there's just nothing that compares with there's a difference between like, oh, I went on an exotic safari in some country, I feel like I know the country, versus actually living and doing work in another country that is not your home culture. That forces you to evolve your communication skills in a way that nothing else can.
Have you seen that book, Art of War? Or
Sun Tzu?
It's very common. Yes. My dad did share that with me when I was young. Like, read that.
Nice.
And
did you read that?
Yes, I still remember bits and pieces, but I do feel that sometimes in Asian working culture, it's a lot like a very soft war, a silent war. Not that it's like you need to be aggressive, but there is that dynamic of who's in power, and if you need something decided on, then you have a different way of doing it. It's a good book to remind. I should read that again, actually. To remind myself.
I remember reading that a long time ago, but it's probably more relevant for me now than it was when I was, I don't know, 18 or something, there's I was in Singapore once when I was working at Facebook, and I was my client was GM, the car company, and I went to Singapore to meet with like the GM like regional team. So I was there with like GM's like head of APAC, who's a Canadian guy, and then he had all these people like reporting to him, who are like the GM Thailand person, GM Singapore person, Philippines person, and I got close with like this guy who was directly reporting to this guy who's head of APAC, and he was Singaporean. And he took me out for dinner once, and he was telling me he used to work at Toyota, Japanese car company, obviously, and then now he's at GM, American car company. And he said the difference between GM and Toyota is that in Toyota, they reward farmers, and in GM, they reward hunters. And I think that's like an interesting way to think about the difference between the way people in the West and the East approach business, right? Like in America, it's about chasing the next hot thing and building something great as quickly as possible and faster than anyone else, which is great in its own way. But in like, let's say a Japanese company, and you could extend this throughout a lot of Asian companies, it's about more like harvesting and building upon what you currently have. And like, let's say internal accountability and accounting, that's probably more put together in an Asian company, but getting new clients and new business and new initiatives, that's probably better in a Western company. So when you said that, I was like, I've never heard that before, but I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the comparison of a farmer and a hunter. Like, it's such a dynamic. That's what it's like. It's completely opposite. And the ones that really can balance both will succeed because you can pretty much work anywhere
Yeah.
and do business anywhere. It's a challenge. You have to switch many heads and have many faces
Yeah.
and
That's
be clear.
yeah. I think something we've probably just naturally have to deal with ourselves through living these places.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for your time. I don't know if you want to as any well, actually you've already said a lot of wisdom. You've shared your favorite books and novels and everything. It's been great. Uh do you have this is the quick fire questions now, actually. They're more lighthearted stuff. So I'm gonna ask you three questions. The first one is, what's the best thing you've watched recently when it comes to, I don't know, TV show, film, YouTube video, TED Talk, whatever?
Best thing I've watched. That's a really. I love Godfather. I always watch it, and Rocky.
You watched that recently?
It's a staple. That's
Yeah.
not. I watch it all the time, like once
That's
a
great.
week.
Wait, which was your favorite Godfather film?
Oh my God, all of them. But okay, let's stick to something recent. Maybe Chess
Okay,
Gambit
if you want
or
to.
Queen Gambit.
I
Queen
keep hearing
Gambit.
about this. Is it? Would you recommend it? I heard a lot about this.
Amazing. The Last Dance as well was pretty.
Yes.
The Last Dance.
Yep.
That was brilliant. I love watching sports documentaries specific to coaches as well, because they handle teams in a different way.
Yeah.
It's not about the player; it's about how the coach deals with so many other people. The playbook is good. Yeah, there's heaps. There's actually a lot. Crown. I mean, I like anything to do with either hierarchy and coaching.
Yeah.
And yeah, how about you? I'm curious when people ask this.
Watched recently?
Yeah.
Probably The Last Dance is the last thing I could think of. I haven't watched many things recently. Last Dance, and yeah, that's about, apart from like nerdy business lectures that I try to watch and stuff, like it's mainly The Last Dance and stuff. I watched Tenet recently. I don't know if
okay, I haven't seen it.
I thought it was pretty good. Because also, as you might know, like New Zealand cinemas are open right now, so I got to watch Tenet at the movie theater, and that was great. Like I've seen a lot of other Christopher Nolan stuff, like I think Interstellar and Inception, both great films, right? So Tenet was similar type of style, and I thought it was amazing. And it was.
Did you have a TV? Did you have a TV when you were a kid? Yeah. When you were a kid, well, you were never allowed.
I mean, I didn't have my own one. I had like in the living room, but not my own. Yeah, my parents were definitely conservative about that kind of stuff too. How about something you've read recently? Is there anything you've read recently, like book, article?
Well, that's the thing. I love books more. I don't really hang out in Netflix. I get too bored, my attention span. So I've been reading a lot of stuff that people have been recommending in our fellowship program. So Barbarian Days, which is about a surfing kind of culture.
What's it about? That sounds interesting.
Barbarian Days. Okay. So he won a Nobel Prize for this book, and it's really about surfing. Yep. But it's just beautiful. Written on writing well.
I've heard that's great.
Bukowski, I love Bukowski. Okay. There's one, this is really inappropriate, but there's a poem there it's a love poem. Yeah. But it's about him and the asshole of a woman. Yeah. So it's a love poem, but it takes it absurd, like how Bukowski is a little bit nuts. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. I love reading, and I would read 5 books at the same time if I could. I love that.
How about you? Reading wise, I've recently read. I'm reading a biography of Larry Ellison right now. The guy who founded Oracle. I'm trying to think what I read before that. I read a book also, Leadership Lessons from the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team.
That would be interesting.
So it was like I forget who wrote it, but someone. It has this, typical business management jargon, like this is how you be a better leader, but with the analogy of the All Blacks and like examining different principles that the team uses as ways to think about how you can structure your team at work. It was pretty a good way to look at it. So I thought that was a great book. That's the last thing I read. And then before that, I also tried to read like 10 books at once. So if I had more time, and I would just probably read all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could just get paid to read. That would be
Yeah.
really good.
Well, I mean, we're on the path to getting paid to write soon enough, right? I mean, with On Deck, like the goal is that we all become
Yeah.
full-time wealthy writers, I think. So that's the
Yeah, I
plan.
mean, it's a good thing to get
Yeah.
clear, and what we talked about in the beginning about feedback,
Yeah.
being open to it, and it just comes out so much better.
Yeah.
All the work that you do, whether it's a podcast or writing,
Yeah.
or even a job, if you're not getting feedback, then it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, no, totally. The last question I have on that quick fire stuff is, how about something you've listened to recently? Podcast, or it could be a song, like maybe a great concert or album you listened to recently.
Oh my God. Okay. These are really tough. I also love to listen to
I think it says a lot about the person,
things.
like to know what they are
Yeah.
consuming media wise,
Yeah. I do like Art of Happiness by Arthur Books, I believe, or Brooks.
That's an audiobook?
It's a podcast.
Okay.
He
Oh, really?
writes
Okay.
I think he writes for The Atlantic, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
I could be totally misquoting all this, but I'll link it to you after.
Yeah.
In terms of an album, I really love Post Malone.
I love Post Malone too.
I have a like guilty pleasure with this album. I don't know why I can't stop listening to it.
Do you have a song? Circles is so good.
Circles, yes. Allergy or allergic? Allergic,
Yeah,
right?
I'm gonna write those down too.
I am the worst with trying to remember all this, but yeah, I think it's allergy or allergic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, do you have a last piece of advice? Because I think we're all in a very time transition right now, right? Whether it's related to COVID, whether it's your business, whether it's someone's personal life, it's not always easy for everybody right now. So, I guess, do you have advice for anyone going through this time period based on everything you've learned over the last 9 months, perhaps?
Okay, well, probably two things. One, this is a weird thing. The subtle art of not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
It's a very airport book. Everyone read it, but
I haven't read it yet. But would you recommend it?
Yes, just in a sense that if you're a control freak and you like to determine certain paths for yourself, it's a good one just to like let go and be like, okay, good things can happen, and there are certain things I can't control. Second thing is, I have three. Sorry, the second one is read Atomic Habits.
Sure. James Clear, right?
Yeah.
I've heard
as
about
cliched
that.
as if there's anything, people are so afraid to succeed or do things because they are looking for the perfect thing. Like you need the perfect mic or you need the perfect platform for your newsletter, and just get it done and do it every day, the same time, the same length, and you'll get better. And then the third one, which really helped me, was journaling. So writing every day about just things you learn in business or a person, and whether it's one line or 10 pages or 4 pages, just get it done. And it's just nice to look at how you've changed a week ago to a month ago. Yeah, those 3 are pretty good.
Well, that's
There's
great.
a lot more you can do.
Yeah, no, that's plenty. Well, great. Thank you so much. It was great chatting. Great.
You have to give me advice, though.
My advice. Oh shit.
You have to
one
give me
or three,
advice.
because you have 3 impactful things. I can't think of 3.
Just one.
Should I try?
One
okay.
from you. Yeah.
Mind fuck yourself. And what I mean by that is everything is psychological, and whatever story you tell yourself and whatever you write down, whatever you believe. I was talking to a friend once who's asking for my advice. She's about to go on stage and like give a talk, and things like when the first time she's giving a talk. And I always think, I think of some of the best speakers I know. I think of like Sheryl Sandberg as an example, right? Like I saw her quite a lot when I was at Facebook, an amazing speaker. And when my friend asked me for advice, what I said was, well, just imagine, like close your eyes and just pretend that you're Sheryl Sandberg. Imagine like a Freaky Friday situation where you switch bodies with her, and imagine yourself having the confidence, the poise, the eloquence, the aura of someone like her. And if you kind of
Yeah.
believe that you can do that, then you'll exhibit that in the way you do something. So anything that's happening right now in life when it comes, or any specific challenges someone's going through, I think your biggest weapon to get through it is your own psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the whole mind fuck yourself. I'm gonna put that somewhere.
We should get like a
'Cause
tattoo of it or something, Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
people should be crazier. I just think, in my family, I'm considered a bit absurd. Like they're
Really?
always waiting for things. They're always waiting for any stories I'd get into or things that have happened to me or things I would say.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with being a bit, mind fucking things
Yeah.
and being absurd.
I think the older I get, the more I realize that those are the only type of people I really want to hang out with. So I think it's important.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a quote on the road for that.
Oh, really?
About like mad people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll link it to you. I'll share it to you.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.